One of my favourite things about Deltarune has got to be its attitude towards secret hunting. It feels like wherever you go, in Hometown or in the Dark Worlds, there are like hundreds of tiny mysteries for you to explore and piece together. That combined with the staggered release schedule of the game itself is probably why Deltarune has such a strong theorist community. One of the longest running and most difficult mysteries to unpick, in my opinion, is Kris's backstory. Probably because this little shit tries to hide everything from us at every opportunity, we get precious little hints every chapter about who they are and their relationship with everyone else in Hometown. But if you accumulate everything about them, you'd notice that we actually have a lot on Kris's past. To keep track of everything we're going to be going through, I've made this handy dandy little timeline. We're going to be starting with the most obvious stuff, that the game literally spoon feeds to us, before moving to stuff that we can comfortably infer, before talking about some off-the-walls insane conspiracy theories. The most obvious place to start is probably the fact that Kris is adopted. I feel like you could deduce this by, well, looking at them. Evidence. Toriel literally took out a book on taking care of adopted humans. We don't know how long ago Kris was adopted, but presumably it happened long in the past, given that Kris is well situated in Hometown by the time the game starts. Obviously Kris has an older brother, Asriel, and the game basically shoves it down our throat that Kris was especially close with him. However, Kris was also close with the Holiday family, who were family friends and to a lesser degree, everyone else in Hometown. They played make-believe with the Holidays, tried to be friends with Bratty, did dark magic with Catty, and gamed with Berkeley. Something weird about this period that kinda keeps me up at night is that Kris kinda created all the darkness in the game during this time of their life. Now I know this sounds like it should be a theory, but it's literally stated in game. Like Kris would take the laptop home with Noelle and instead of using it like a normal kid, pretend it was Queen. And they actually kinda existed, even without the fountains being present yet. So everything they've seen in the Dark Worlds are like their imaginary friends come to life. I have no idea how that's going to play into the lore, but it's canon. They didn't just play make-believe though. The Spamton sweepstakes tell us that Kris, Asriel, Des and Noelle would go out into the forest regularly to play around. Kris was a regular troublemaker, basically rage-baiting Noelle, who would be protected by Des. Pretty soon after, Des went missing, or died, or was like mauled by Asgore's tribe. We know that this was the instigating incident that causes Kris's life to fall apart, because she's the first to disappear in Tenna's cutscene. Soon after, we know Kris's father was fired by Carol from the police force, and it's probably not a stretch to say whatever happened to Des is related to what got Asgore fired. After Carol and Des leave Tenna's cutscene, Asgore is next, so we know this is when Toriel divorces his broke ass. He moved into the Flower King, where he fails to sell flowers for a living, and also works for Carol as a part-time maid and a part-time PI on the side. Noelle and Rudy are next to leave, so I would guess that Rudy's illness around this time is what caused Noelle to drift away from the Dreemurr household. Soon, Asriel was off to college alone, leaving Kris alone with her mother. To make matters worse, Susie moved into Hometown and began bullying Kris as well, only holding back on the kid because of how nice their mum was. But obviously, the events of the game then see Susie to stop threatening to kill Kris in school. On the absolute surface level, this is what Kris's life seemed like. By all means, this was largely what Kris's backstory discussion revolved around in the ancient days before chapters 3 and 4. See, with each addition to the game, our understanding of Kris has basically swung one way to the other. At the end of chapter 1, the Kris discussion was in essence, are they going to do their own genocide route in Hometown? Then, in chapter 2, we got all this information about Kris's sad backstory and upbringing, and also how we the player are canonically hijacking Kris's soul. This all made us seem like bad guys, while Kris was really just an innocent teenager. With the deeper information we get in chapters 3 and 4, Kris has swung once again into the are they evil conversations. Let's start with the most obvious and work our way inwards. So Kris is very obviously working for Carol, and a bit less obviously working for the Knight. I mainly want to ask when it happened. Presumably Kris was searching for Des immediately after she disappeared, and soon after got Asgore in on the conversation as well. Honestly, you could place this anywhere on the timeline, but my best guess is that Kris joined the conspiracy after Asriel left college but before Susie joined school. This is purely based on when they leave in the tenor cutscene. Maybe because they were so busy, evil scheming with Carol and the Knight in the bunker, they didn't have time to watch TV. The question obviously arises, why is Kris working for Carol? To fully answer that, we need to look at something deeper that the game never explicitly talks about, but heavily hints towards. Kris isn't a demon like Kara, but for sure has some burning hatred in them. ERAM tells us as much in their dialogue, even suggesting that they enjoyed the weird route. They carry a knife on them at all times, and we have some evidence that they have harmed people in the past before. If you talk to Bratty, she'll remember the time she kept on using Kris as a waiter, asking them to bring over food for her, because they were younger and would do anything she said to hang out. Then, after doing this a few times, she had to go home because she got sick. I'm not saying Kris poisoned her when they caught on, but for sure Kris poisoned her when they caught on. So Kris had some kind of anger burning inside them deep down. We also know this has manifested multiple times in the past. The Chapter 4 Egg Room mentions of something that you can never wash away, no matter how many times you try. Hints heavily that Kris did something reprehensible, even evil in the past. We know Kris went to art therapy for whatever they did, considering the rest of the whole scene. Now, I can't prove that this is connected to Des's disappearance, but it'd be weird if it wasn't, right? There's definitely some connection here which I will touch on later. So for now we can say that Kris played some role in Des's disappearance, and is helping Carol in some way as penance for it. I also think we can assume Kris doesn't feel comfortable following through on their deal with Carol. I think it's safe to say Kris's crash out over Spampton had little to do with us. Spampton was the guy who took phone calls from a disembodied higher power, basically doing their bidding, before being left out to dry once their usage was up. This sounds a lot more like Kris taking calls from Carol and doing her bidding rather than our relationship with them. So on a slightly deeper level of analysis, especially considering the information the game presents to us in chapters 3 and 4, Kris is characterized less as a victim of the player and more as someone who is doing something they don't want to do in penance of something they did in their past. Kris isn't exactly under our complete control, but rather under Carol's. The Lightworld segment in chapter 4 basically tells us that Kris can willingly rip us out whenever they want. They can exist basically normally without the soul as well, shown by their visit to Noelle in the night before in the weird route. They are also using us more than we use them. Of course, this is excluding the events of the actual weird route itself, where we take a far more controlling stake in Kris's actions. This is, by all means, what I think the game is almost certainly trying to tell us about Kris so far. That they were a child surrounded by friends and love until a tragic accident of their own doing caused it all to fall apart, now working to rebuild their fractured life. Aside from the death stuff, there's also the question of how mechanically Kris and Carol got us into them. I don't even want to touch on that because there's zero explanation other than Ringgaster doing it all. But I think we can go a little bit deeper. What exactly happened to Des? How exactly did Kris knightify her? I think I have an answer, but it sounds insane. Lost where the forest would grow, the children followed the pointed tail. The poor children. This is probably the most enigmatic and interesting slide we are showed in the prophecy in chapter 4, and it raises so many questions. What is the forest and who are the children being mentioned, and why are they lost, and who is the pointed tail? Let's break this down bit by bit. Given that the prophecy can accurately describe things in the past, and the only plot-relevant children with backstories we know are Asriel, Des, Kris, and Noelle, we can assume the children being referred to are in some combination of these four. The forest being referred to is either a metaphorical one, symbolizing how lost the children were, or an actual forest, or even both. Given what we've already seen about how the Dreemurr and Holiday children used to play in the forest surrounding Hometown at night, as Noelle said in the Spampton Sweepstakes, I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the forest the line is talking about. But there's more to this forest. You see, trees have an oddly significant symbolic importance in Deltarune. Obviously, there's a tree in this part of the prophecy, but there's also the odd roots panel that accompanies this one, showing two trees and a house in the middle of them. Trees surround Hometown from all sides with seemingly no connection to the outside world. There's the forgotten man trying to get Kris to remember something behind a tree. Kris has so many little allusions to apples which literally grow on trees. Even Spampton's theme and ERAMs are connected by their naming scheme of roots, connecting back to the prophecy panel. When you notice how much Deltarune makes reference to trees, it starts to feel a little bit weird. But from this we can clearly see that trees are mainly tied with Kris. All of these things seem to include personal moments from Kris's past in some way. However, there's one last reference to trees that I've been hiding from you, and in my opinion it cracks the meaning of this line. The sword root minigames in Chapter 3 make repeated references to trees. The second secret board game involves cutting down trees that look identical to those in Hometown to find the Ice Mage in the white cloak. Tenna is blocked behind a wall of these same trees at the end of the next secret board game as well. Kris is obviously deeply tied to the sword root games in some way. I want to make a full analysis of this in another video, but the root clearly in some part reflects Kris's anxieties, fears and history. Having to kill Rousey and Susie in the third board game is symbolic of Kris's fear that they're selling out their friends by working with the Knight and Carol. The references to the Snowgrave route in the second board game are metaphorical of Kris's fear of control we could exert over them and how we could manipulate Noelle. ERAM represents something deep inside of Kris's psyche that clearly knows them on a very deep level. Similarly, is it a stretch to say that the first board game is an abstract version of Kris's past? Let's look at the events in the first game. At first, we spawn into the peaceful island from the first Tenna game, only there are no aggressive enemies, rather these creatures roam around peacefully. Then we pick up a sword and the creatures become violent. After killing all of them, including some which were previously hidden in an off-bound section, we level up enough to break trees, at which point we can cut through the trees acting as walls to the game world and go out of bounds, going deep into a forest before finding the ice key and completing the game. Does this not sound like identical to this line in the prophecy and to our characterization of Kris? We know Kris carries a knife around everywhere, similar to the sword found in game, and we know they've had a violent streak, similar to the killing we do in the game. The line about getting lost in the forest seems to mirror the final part of the game, where we go so deep into the forest it's almost like we're lost. But I know what you're saying. What is the pointed tail, and why does this prophecy express concern for the children? Well, could this pointed tail maybe not be referring to friend, but instead metaphorically refer to Kris's knife? And as for why the children are somehow in trouble, I think this implication is clear. The thing that Kris did that was related to death and was potentially violent, that was this event, with a knife somewhere around in Hometown's forest. Maybe that's why we get the ice key at the end of this round, because ice is so heavily associated with the Holiday family. I know this kinda sounds like a reach, maybe the tale could not be metaphorical and might just be talking about friend instead, or maybe even something else. Maybe the sword route isn't meant to be taken that metaphorically, and instead just a bunch of creepy stuff happening to Kris to creep us out. But I think there's some merit to some part of what I just said. Somewhere in there has to be something worthwhile. With that final part of analysis, we can piece together a reasonable assumption of Kris's backstory before the events of the game. Kris was adopted by the Dreemurr family at some point many years ago. They formed a close bond with their brother and their neighbours, the Holidays. They would all play together, both at the Dreemurr's house where they would watch TV, and play make-believe with what would become the Darkness, and outside in the forests around Hometown. But it wasn't all happy. For some reason, Kris developed a violent streak. Sometimes when they felt threatened or had built up anger, they would take it out on others, such as when they poisoned Bratty because she trolled them. They somehow got access to a knife which they kept with them at all times. One time, when they were playing in the forest around Hometown as usual, Kris got lost in the forest, and for some reason something happened and they snapped, doing something to Des with their knife which knightified her. In the fallout from her disappearance, Asgore failed to find her and was fired by Carol, but in secret they continued to work together to find out where Des really was. The added stress by Des's disappearance and Asgore's failure to find her was probably the last straw in Toriel and his marriage, and pretty soon after, they divorced, and Kris's dad went to live in his flower shop, which was really a front for his work with Carol. Perhaps because of the trauma of losing her sister, Noelle stopped hanging out with the Dreemurrs. Around this time, maybe worsened by the stress of losing his daughter, Rudy got seriously ill and was hospitalized as well. Kris's only friend left was Azriel, who would still take them to QC's diner, even as the family stopped going to church together. But a few months before the beginning of the game, Azrael leaves as well. Realizing how truly alone they are, and feeling intense guilt for their actions, Kris made a promise to Carol to help them to find their daughter. For some reason, this plan involved putting their soul inside of Kris, and ensuring they were the hero of the prophecy. Kris got so busy collaborating with Carol that they stopped watching TV with their mother, causing Toriel to comment on how worried she had been feeling about Kris. By the time the game begins, Kris has been prepared to handle the soul, and knows the general plan of how the night will open dark worlds. That is pretty much everything I can find out about Kris from the game in its current form. I expect a lot more will come out in chapters 5, 6 and 7 about what exactly Kris did to Des, and the details of how their life came apart. I really love Kris's character. They are by far the most complicated and mysterious character in my opinion, and I think the way that Toby Fox is revealing Kris's backstory, forcing you to put it together in pieces that come in chapters apart from each other, until you can finally string together a timeline like this is so compelling. I hope you enjoyed this little analysis. Like and subscribe or something, I don't know.